Bienvenidos a mi cita médica. Me da muchísimo gusto que nos acompañen porque hoy vamos a hablar de un tema de gran relevancia, tanto en California como en todo Estados Unidos y desafortunadamente en muchas partes del mundo. Me refiero al abuso en la ingesta de opioides. Este problema se ha agudizado con la pandemia de COVID-19 y justamente vamos a hablar acerca de todo lo que se puede hacer para mitigar esta crisis de opioides, cómo podemos enfrentarla y lograr que los pacientes obtengan la analgesia que necesitan, es decir, que se les pueda quitar el dolor cuando lo tienen, pero sin los riesgos que representa el ingerir estos medicamentos y sobre todo sin el riesgo que representa una sobredosis de los mismos. Y para ello es un enorme honor para mí dar la más cordial bienvenida en mi cita médica al ingeniero Joe Kiani. El ingeniero Joe Kiani es fundador del Movimiento por la Seguridad del Paciente y de Máximo, y el doctor, quien es William Wilson. El doctor Wilson es anestesiólogo, fue director médico de la Universidad de California en Irvine, es profesor emérito de la Universidad de California y bueno, pues actualmente es director médico de Máximo. Y nos van a platicar acerca de todo lo que se puede hacer para mitigar esta crisis. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Welcome, Mr. Joe Kiani. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you, Dr. Perez.
Dr. Wilson, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Perez. It's my pleasure to be here today.
So, well, for me, it's an honor to have you talking about this important topic that is the opioid crisis. We're going to start with Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson, tell us, please, how bad is the opioid crisis after COVID-19?
Thank you. The crisis is very severe. It was an epidemic before the COVID-19 pandemic and got even worse. And an example of some of the depth of the severity, the CDC has evaluated the number of opioid deaths in the fiscal year 2020, and there were about a little over 56,000 deaths in the United States from opioids. And in fiscal year 2021, that number increased to above 75,000 patients. Both of those numbers are very high, but that 75,000 number is the highest ever recorded. So this is an exacerbated epidemic due to the pandemic stressors.
What factors have contributed to this?
Numerous factors. The stress of and worry of the unknown that essentially affected the entire society, but also the risk of financial pressures, for some individuals, social isolation, and not knowing how to best protect loved ones early, and then later, not being able to do something yourself. All of those stressors were problematic. Now, some areas of society were particularly affected more than others. And those individuals who could not work from home, their only way of earning funds is to be on the job, were disproportionately affected, both from a financial perspective and then sometimes even in terms of infectivity.
What happens in the body of a person who is taking opioids?
The opioids, when they get into the bloodstream, go to receptors in the brain and other parts of the body, but particularly the brain, that cause a decrease in pain and a sense of well-being, but they also have an effect of decreasing respiratory rate and the drive to breathe. So the benefits of opioids sometimes have this counteractive risk factor that we have to always be aware of.
Vamos a hacer una pausa y vamos a regresar para hablar acerca de la importancia del monitoreo. ¿Por qué es importante hacer monitoreo de las personas que están tomando opioides? Hacemos una pausa, regresamos con más. Gracias por continuar con nosotros en mi cita médica. Estamos hablando acerca del consumo de opioides y por qué es tan importante que una persona que está consumiendo opioides sea monitoreada y de qué forma puede realizarse ese monitoreo. Y de ello vamos a hablar con el ingeniero Joe Chiani, que por cierto es miembro honorario de la Academia Mexicana de Cirugía. Mr. Chiani, please let us know why it is so important that people taking opioids has to be monitored.
Because when you take opioids, it not only gets rid of the pain and gives you the euphoria that some people look for, but that pain that it takes away is also the pain that reminds you to breathe. If you hold your breath for a while, you'll get this insatiable urge to breathe. And that's because your carbon dioxide is building up and it's hurting and you want to breathe. People who take opioids don't have that pain. So they get to this fine line of no pain and no breath. But if you have a monitor on these people, when they lose their urge to breathe automatically, the monitor will show a drop in oxygen saturation. And that drop can be hopefully a warning and an alarm that will wake the person up and remind them to breathe. So, and of course, if they don't wake up, the alarm will notify someone who's caring for the person to come and wake them up.
And could you please explain to us how is this monitoring done?
Yes, of course. We invented the modern day pulse oximeter. This is a pulse oximeter that can measure oxygen saturation and pulse rate, even when the person is active or moving. I'm wearing one right now, and on the top are the light emitting diodes that shine on my finger, and on the bottom is a photo detector that detects the light coming through. Because of the two light emitting diodes we chose, red and infrared, we can tell by the change in the color of the blood through the photodetector if the person is well oxygenated or not. So you can imagine when someone's well oxygenated, the blood is red. If they're deoxygenated, they get blue. And we can see that color change. This is an invention that goes back to the 70s, actually done by Dr. Aoyagi in Japan. But we made it so that even if the person's moving, the measurement is still accurate and reliable. So that's how the measurement is done. This is now a new wearable untethered product that can last 4 to 5 days without change of the battery.
Of course, this doesn't represent any discomfort for the patient.
No, it's truly non-invasive. It just shines light through the body.
Mm-hmm. So this pulse oximetry, you already explained how it works, but there is this special technology that you referred to that is very accurate when the hands of the person are cold, for example, when there are change of temperature in the body, and when the person is moving. How is that possible?
Well, the invention we made assumes that there is movement. And during that movement, you get venous blood moving back and forth, which normally tricks conventional pulse oximeters to underread the arterial oxygen saturation because it sees the venous blood. We came up with a very sophisticated technology using adaptive filters and multiple parallel engines to signal processing engines to extract the arterial signal that is sometimes overwhelmed by the venous blood noise. This is an invention that dates back to 1991 to 1994. I started Massimo in 1989. And today, over 200 million people each year are monitored with our technology globally. And it has helped dramatically help clinicians, help patients. For example, in the neonatal ICU, where babies would become blind from being given too much oxygen, because as they wiggled and moved, the pulse oximeter would underread, and then the nurse would increase the oxygen, which would damage their retina. we've been able to almost virtually eliminate those because of our accuracy. And then back to the opioid, in the post-surgical ward, a 10-year study was done on patients taking opioids at Dartmouth-Hitchcock that showed that the group with our technology had no one dying, no one getting brain damaged. Unfortunately, the group that didn't have it, they did have death and brain damage. And by the way, the technology paid for itself. They saved $7 million a year by implementing this technology because it reduced ICU transfers and rapid response team activation.
Thank you, Mr. Chiani. Let's do a pause and we continue talking about the opioid crisis and what we can do about it. Vamos a hacer una pausa y regresamos con más sobre este tema. Muchas gracias por continuar con nosotros en mi cita médica. Seguimos hablando acerca de la crisis de opioides y yo le quisiera preguntar al doctor Wilson a este respecto. Dr. Wilson, please let us know how frequent is respiratory depression among those persons who are taking opioids at the dose prescribed by their physician.
Yes, some degree of respiratory depression will occur with every dose of opioid, regardless of whether the patient is taking the full dose that's prescribed or even half the dose. We've had examples of patients whose respiratory depression was so severe that they actually stopped breathing and died by taking less than the full dose, half the full dose. And this is a significant problem that affects all aspects of society, all individuals taking opioids.
Are there persons that are more prone to respiratory depression when they're taking opioids?
Yes, so it's a matter of age as a number one factor. The older the patients are, the more likely. But having said that, we have examples of healthy 25-year-old individuals that even when not taking the full dose, can have severe respiratory depression. But typically, key factors are age, coexisting severe illness, those patients that have sleep apnea, and if their spouse or other family members know that they are loud snorers when they're asleep, they may have sleep apnea and not even know it. And those patients are at much higher risk. In addition to those factors with the individuals, the dose, of course, can have an effect, but sometimes other drugs that the patient may be taking at the same time, they may not know that it will have an effect. Alcohol, other sedatives, when you add to that, if the patient's already sleep deprived, so sometimes they'll go in for an operation and all the stress of going in, they maybe didn't get a lot of sleep the night before, now finally the operation's over, they go home, they think they're safe, and they're taking opioids and they're sleep deprived. That adds on to the factor increased risk of opioid depression.
Dr. Wilson, what should a family member be aware of when it comes to symptoms that can announce a respiratory depression, alert symptoms?
Yes, thank you. That's really important. If we're going to intervene, we need to know what signs and symptoms will be present. And if the individual is awake still, you can look at their pupils and they'll be really small, so-called pinpoint pupils. Their breathing will be slowed and labored. Now, as they become more sedated, they actually may be asleep. You may need to speak loudly into the ear, rub their chest firmly to cause some discomfort to arouse them. And you may hear some gurgling breathing or labored breathing. If their fingertips are blue or their lips are blue, then that's a sign that they have had low oxygen for some period of time. We call that cyanosis, but that's an indication that their oxygen level is really getting really dangerously low. And what is really important is that if you do get to the individual and they're still breathing, if you can stimulate them to wake them up or try and keep them awake, then you know that they will continue breathing. So that's like essential point number one. Essential point number two is if you do have access to naloxone or so-called Narcan. Naloxone and Narcan are the same medication, and it used to only be available in a needle, but it can be now inserted nasally. So if you have nasal naloxone, to give that to this individual that is in this state, and then that will rapidly get absorbed into the bloodstream by the nasal capillaries and help to further arouse the individual. Now recognize that the nasal naloxone only lasts about 20 minutes or so. So they may go back to sleep again. So that's just temporary. You need to make sure that somebody stays with them. And if it's severe, that 911 still be called while you're doing this rescue therapy.
Yeah. Dr. Wilson, thank you very much. We're going to continue. We're going to do a pause and we're going to continue with this topic. Vamos a hacer una pausa y continuamos con este tema. Gracias por continuar con nosotros en Mi Cita Médica. Un punto importante es lo que se puede hacer para ayudar con el síndrome de abstinencia cuando una persona deja los opioides, y justamente para eso existe un artefacto conocido como Bridge. Mr. Chiani, how can Bridge help for a person with withdrawal symptoms when they are taking opioids and want to stop?
Well, Bridge is a very simple device. It's a small device that fits behind your ear, and these electrodes that you see are put behind your ear at certain locations where it stimulates the nerves so that the withdrawal symptoms you feel from opioids are masked. This is the tension, the nausea, the nervousness. And what's incredible about it, it's the first device to help deal with these opioid reactions when you're getting withdrawal symptoms. Other tools have been other drugs that also can cause overdose and addiction, like methadone. So what we've seen, both from studies as well as evidence individually that we witness, is that on 80% of the people, within 30 minutes, those withdrawal symptoms are gone. What normally takes days with methadone, you can get done on about 80% of the people within 30 minutes. And I've seen individuals firsthand that have been trying to get over their opioid addiction, and 18 hours into it, they can't concentrate, they're fidgeting, they're moving, they can't eat. We put this on them and they get calm, they relax, they get hungry. They had 2 burritos. So it's incredible. I hope this thing really continues to show the incredible progress it's showing, but it could speed up people's recovery, help them go back to work without those terrible reactions you get when you stop taking opioids.
And anyone can wear those devices?
Yes, anyone can wear them. We recommend a doctor to insert them. There's tiny little pins that have to be located in the right spots. I don't know if you can see that, but yes, anyone can wear them. Of course, for adults, it's not meant for children.
And its success rate is, as you explained, very, very high.
Very high, very high. And I think it could be a great way to not only speed up the process of getting rid of your opioid addiction, but hopefully at least a tool in that process.
Mr. Chiani, Dr. Williams, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you so much for covering this, Dr. Perez. I think it's such an important topic. We lose way too many people to opioid overdose. We really appreciate being on your program.
Yes, so agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias al ingeniero Chiani y al doctor Wilson. Y por supuesto, muchas gracias a ustedes por el favor de su atención. Hasta la próxima.